So in this tail end, before we say our goodbyes, we're just going to, my job will be to look at our draft standards for assessment, which we'll go through very briefly, and then Jonathan will wrap up and our President, Nick Talley, will also have a few words to say. So you'll be pleased to know I've got one slide. This is it. Don't you love it when people say, I've just got one slide? Yes. In your materials in preparation for this workshop, you have received a copy of standards that we have drafted as a college, standards for assessment. And in essence, what we're trying to capture here is that for all of our training programs, and there's about 40 of them, that in thinking about assessment, the assessments we have in those programs, that we ensure that they meet these standards. And the idea for these standards came from the external review the college commissioned in 2011, where we had an international group of, or panel of 3 experts, have a look at how we approach assessment in the college, formative assessment and examinations, and they recommended a number of very useful things. One is to develop a curriculum standards framework, which we have now done, and you have a copy of that in your materials. And the second is to look at standards for assessment themselves. And so we've drafted these based on the literature and consulting and looking at what other colleges do. And they fall into 3 categories: thinking about planning assessments for a training program, ensuring that the educational value and rationale is clearly thought about, and it's not just a series of activities that are not particularly connected to a higher purpose, that they are indeed fit for purpose, that they are aligned to the curriculum, and that they form a program of assessment, which we started to talk about today. In the implementation of assessments, that we ensure that they are fair and transparent, and the processes for decision making are fair and transparent for supervisors and trainees. That sustainability is a key one for us for obvious reasons we've talked about today, that what we design has to be feasible. That it involves feedback, because that's the key critical mechanism by which assessment contributes to learning for trainees, is using them for feedback to improve performance, and communication training underpinning that. And that there is a process of evaluation to keep our assessment up to date and about monitoring how they're doing. Now they're the headlines. In your document there's actually detailed standards underneath each of those. And this is really important because these standards will form the basis of a policy the college will develop next year on assessment, and then it will be the expectation that all of our training programs meet these standards or are working towards meeting the standards. Now, we have had some survey data already, which is in your books, and actually for quite a lot of them, people think that they're when asked how easy would these things be to implement in your training program, for quite a few of them people have said, oh, we've actually already implemented them, or they'd be relatively easy to implement. But for others there you'll see that actually for some of them quite a few people think will be challenging or difficult to implement, and they're ones that we're going to have to look at a bit more carefully. I guess I'll ask, does anyone have any additional comments or feedback on those standards now? They have a burning issue they'd like to raise now? Okay. Oh, Aravind, yes.
I don't know if it's aligned with some other specialties as well. We have a education and assessment program which doesn't really fit in a box with the prep assessment tools. I suspect some other specialties may be the same. You know, how would the college go about integrating those sort of educational tools that other specialties or special societies might be using, which don't necessarily fit into a prep program or this particular program we've discussed today?
I think the prep tools, I mean, that there's a prep, I think we have to be clear about terminology. I mean, PREP actually is the educational framework, the physician readiness for expert practice. There are certain tools that were associated with the implementing of that, the mini-CX, case-based discussion, etc. But this sits above that, if you like. So this is, if you're requiring trainees to complete these assessments together, what across nuclear medicine, how we're assessing across that whole program. Some will involve the PREP tools, some will be these other activities that you're referring to. They still need to meet these standards. They still need to be aligned to the curriculum somewhere. They still need to be fair and transparent. So I think these are the
as long as it meets these standards, that would be fine.
That's right. You may, after today's discussion, want to have a read of these and say, actually I think we need to have something more about, for instance, Tim mentioned the importance of separating collection of observation data from decision making, and that might be something that could be incorporated into a standard somewhere. There are other things that aren't, I don't think, are captured yet in the standards that probably need to be, like reporting as a program, across our program. How do we have monitoring and oversight over all of our trainees and how they're tracking, that sort of thing, and reporting out through to the college things like results of examinations and so on, ensuring those are done, those are tracking. For instance, that's one thing. But if you do think of other things to add, or if you read this thing, so I actually don't know what that means, please would you tell us and give us your feedback, because it's absolutely critical. And you would send that to curriculum@racp.edu.au. So thank you. Thank you for your attention on that, and if you have any additional feedback, please do send that through. I will now hand over to Jonathan to commence the wrap-up.